Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. I moved to the Colorado wilderness to escape people. No cell service, no neighbors, just trees and silence. 3 days in, a black SUV rolled up my trail, HOA logo on the hood, strangers with fake smiles and legal threats. They thought I'd fold. They didn't know who they were messing with. I never planned on talking to another human for at least a month. That was part of the deal when I bought this land. 60 acres of dense Colorado forest, tucked into a valley between two minor mountain ridges, the kind of place where the cell signal comes and goes like ghosts, and the nearest gas station is a solid 40-minute drive. I'd spent years teaching people how to survive in wilderness for the Army, then another decade consulting for private firms on how not to die in the woods. This was supposed to be the retirement I actually wanted. No meetings, no neighbors, no damn HOA. 3 days after I arrived, I was mid-swing with a hatchet, breaking apart some old deadwood near the ruined hunting cabin when I saw the dust plume curling up the trail from the main road. That was my first warning. Nobody should be coming down that trail unless they were lost, bleeding, or me. I set the axe down, wiped my hands, and walked toward the gate. That's when I saw it. A spotless black SUV, maybe a Range Rover, rolling up like it belonged there. On the hood sat a crisp, white folder stamped with an HOA logo I didn't recognize. I'd been out of suburbia long enough that even the sight of that little seal made my stomach tighten. The doors opened in sequence. First the driver's side, then the back. 3 people stepped out like a slow-motion nightmare. First came the woman, late 50s or early 60s, bleach blonde bob, tan slacks, hiking boots that had never seen dirt. She was flanked by 2 men. One young, square-jawed with a clipboard, the other in a blazer and wearing a laminated badge that said, Legal Representative, Mountain View Preserve. "Are you Samuel Rowling?" she asked, voice sugar and vinegar. I crossed my arms and stayed on my side of the gate. "I am." She gave a tight smile like she was about to upsell me a funeral package. "I'm Karen Bridgewater, president of the Mountain View Preserve Homeowners Association. We've come to deliver an official notice." The young man stepped forward and placed the folder on the gatepost like he was planting a flag. "Notice of compensation claim," Karen said. $50,000 for damages associated with your acquisition of protected land previously designated for community expansion. I blinked. "The hell are you talking about?" She didn't flinch. "This parcel, what you refer to as your property, has been marked on our association's developmental plan for over 5 years. We intended to integrate it into Preserve Area A, a nature zone for our community." "Then you should have bought it," I said flatly. "We intended to." The younger man cut in, as if that meant anything. "We were negotiating with the county. Your purchase circumvented our standing interest." "Standing interest?" I raised an eyebrow. "I bought it through a public county auction. I have the deed. I have the title. I have GPS-stamped surveys filed with the recorder's office. You have zero legal ground." Karen narrowed her eyes. "We're not here to argue. We're here to resolve this amicably. We're asking for compensation to offset the lost value of our intended development." I stared at them for a long moment. "Let me be clear. You're on private property. You have no claim. You have no business here. You're not getting a single dollar." The man with the clipboard pulled out his phone and began filming. "We are documenting the interaction for future arbitration." "Knock yourself out," I said. "You'll want footage of how stupid this is." Karen took a step forward. "We're not leaving until we reach some kind of agreement." I took a step back, calmly pulled my phone from my cargo pocket, and called 911. "Sheriff's Department," the dispatcher answered. "What's your emergency?" "I've got trespassers on my private land claiming they own it because they lost a bid. They're taking measurements, flying drones, and refusing to leave." Karen's eyes twitched slightly at that last part. "We've got a deputy 10 minutes out. Keep your distance if you feel threatened," the dispatcher said. "I feel annoyed," I said. "Does that count?" "Hang tight. They're en route." I hung up and leaned against my gate. One of the men launched a small drone into the air which buzzed lazily up over my clearing like a mechanical vulture. I took out my phone again and filmed the drone. Karen looked mildly irritated by that. When the sheriff's SUV finally pulled in, the same dust cloud trailing behind, Karen turned to him like she was about to win a lawsuit on the spot. She presented her folder, her fake maps, her vision of a nature preserve built over my outhouse. The deputy, a grizzled guy named Mendez I'd met once during the deed handoff, took one look at her documents, then at me. "She's not in your HOA," he said flatly. "Nope." "This is private land, yes?" "Filed with the county and everything." He turned to Karen. "You're on someone else's land without permission. You've been asked to leave?" Karen crossed her arms. This land was clearly intended for— "You've been asked to leave," he repeated. She looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. "Yes." "Then I'm going to strongly suggest you do that now." Karen looked ready to argue, but the legal guy gave her a look. After a few seconds, she nodded, and they started packing up. Before they left, the younger guy handed me one last envelope and said, "You'll be hearing from us." I looked at the envelope, looked back at him, and dropped it directly into the fire barrel behind me. He watched it catch fire without blinking. They left without another word. The drone zipped back into its case, and the black SUV disappeared into the pines. I stood in the clearing, silent, the only sound the crackle of their paperwork burning behind me. 2 days after the visit from the HOA's three-headed Hydra, I was back to working on stabilizing the old cabin's foundation. The rear supports had collapsed inward years ago, probably from snowmelt and neglect, and I was hand-mixing cement to rebuild the footings. I had a tarp roof over the exposed beams, and my tools were neatly stacked. Not exactly luxury, but it beat sharing air with anyone named Karen. Mid-morning, I heard tires on gravel again. Not fast like someone lost. Slow, deliberate, like they were expecting a confrontation. I stepped out from under the tarp, cement-splattered gloves still on, and saw a white government-issue pickup pull up to my gate. Emblazoned on the door was County Fire Safety and Risk Mitigation Region 4. Fantastic. A man in his 50s stepped out, clipboard in hand, khakis too clean for real field work. His belt buckle said Colorado Division of Fire Prevention. He didn't look aggressive, but he also didn't look like someone who liked wasting his time. "You, Mr. Rowling." "Yeah, what's this about?" "Received a complaint about an unsafe structure being occupied in a fire risk zone. Anonymous tip. Said there's evidence of habitation in a collapsed cabin and potential wildfire hazards. Fuel accumulation, unsafe campfires, improperly stored propane." "No propane, no fire, just me and a shovel," I said. "And a very tired roof." He gave me a tight smile. "Mind if I have a look around?" "I do mind, actually," I replied, wiping my gloves off. "But since you're from the county, I'll save us both time." I walked over to my lockbox, pulled out a folder, and handed him 2 sheets. The pre-submitted notice of repair, and a copy of my formal hazard mitigation plan, which I'd filed online the same day I bought the parcel. One of my military habits, paper before people. He scanned the pages, his eyebrows went up. "You already declared the repair zone." "Yup." "And you flagged all open burn restrictions." "Sure did." He looked over my shoulder at the clearing and the stacked brush piles, which I hadn't burned, just cordoned off. "Mind if I take photos for the log?" "Knock yourself out." He took about 10 minutes walking around the area, snapping pictures of the tarp, the clearing, the tool station, the gravel base I'd laid to prevent runoff. When he came back, he sighed and scratched something off on his form. "No violations found. I'll close the report." "You get a lot of anonymous tips from HOAs?" I asked. He gave me a look that wasn't a smile, but might have been its ghost. "Too many." "Mountain View Preserve?" I nodded. "They're persistent," he muttered, "but persistence doesn't override jurisdiction." As he left, I jotted down his plate and took a photo of his ID badge for records. I wasn't paranoid. I just knew the difference between defense and stupidity, and right now the line was getting thinner. That evening, I finished reinforcing the west-facing posts and was washing off my boots when something caught my eye at the edge of the property. A brand new sign. It hadn't been there in the morning, and I sure as hell hadn't put it up. About 100 feet into the tree line, staked into the dirt by a narrow trail, was a bright green metal placard. Future Expansion Zone, Mountain View Preserve HOA. Entry temporarily restricted. They'd nailed it directly into a tree trunk on my side of the line. No lights, no ceremony. Just a bold claim in aluminum and arrogance. I stared at it for a long minute. Then I went back to the shed, grabbed my maul, and returned. With a single swing, I tore it off, splintering the stake in half. I marched it back to camp, propped it against a log, took a photo with the GPS stamp clearly visible on the screen, then threw the thing into my burn barrel and lit a match. I wasn't one for messages, but I made an exception. On a spare sheet of plywood, I painted private property, no HOA authority. Trespassers will be prosecuted the next morning. I mounted it where the old sign had been, only bigger, red lettering, floodlight above it. Just in case they didn't get the message last time. By the third week, I'd stopped expecting things to calm down. After the fire inspector, the boundary sign, and the SUV drone circus, I knew the HOA wasn't just bluffing. They were on a full-court press, but nothing prepared me for what showed up in my inbox that Thursday morning. I was sitting under the awning with black coffee and a mess of blueprints for the solar setup when my phone buzzed with an email from an unfamiliar address, contact@mountainviewpreserve.org. Subject line, formal confirmation of HOA integration agreement, signed. At first, I thought it was just another scare tactic, but when I opened the PDF, my stomach flipped. It was a 2-page document on Mountain View Preserve letterhead. It claimed that I, Samuel Rowling, had voluntarily agreed to incorporate my land into their homeowners association and had accepted mutually beneficial integration terms, including the payment of $50,000 in compensation for delayed development. At the bottom of the document was a signature. My signature, or at least a damn good forgery of it. My jaw clenched so hard I thought I might crack a molar. Whoever forged it had clearly seen my handwriting. It matched the loops, the angle, even the hesitation in the final G of my last name, but I hadn't signed a damn thing. I stared at the screen for a full minute before standing up and pacing the clearing, heart pounding in my ears. They'd officially stepped out of nuisance territory and into criminal fraud. I forwarded the document to my lawyer, Laura King, with the subject line, "We've got a live one." Then I called her. She picked up on the second ring. "Tell me this is the HOA thing." "It's the HOA thing. They just forged my signature on a fake agreement and sent it to me like they thought I'd say thank you." She let out a slow whistle. "That's bold. Stupid, but bold. I want blood. No, you want court-admissible evidence. And I want the server logs. Forward everything, including headers. I'll file with the county clerk and the sheriff's office within the hour. But we need metadata, creation date, IP address, original upload path. I'll subpoena their web host if I have to. And you're going to stay calm," she said, "because this just went from petty harassment to attempted property fraud, which, in Colorado, is a felony. You've got them right where we want them, provided we play it slow and clean." By that evening, we'd filed a formal complaint with the sheriff's office, including the forged PDF and my notarized handwriting sample. Laura also submitted a request to the county IT office to verify whether the document had ever passed through public registry. It hadn't, of course. She was already drafting an injunction request and preemptive cease and desist to keep the HOA from publishing or referencing the forgery publicly. The next morning, I checked Mountain View Preserve's website, and there it was, right on their front page, under the Community News section. "Victory for Conservation, new neighbor joins preserve expansion." The article claimed that I had enthusiastically joined the HOA and recognized the collective value of environmental stewardship, and that I had expressed a desire to support long-term goals through fair compensation. It was accompanied by a smiling stock photo of a man in flannel that was not me, too clean-shaven and about 15 years younger, but captioned, "Mr. Rowling, new member." I actually laughed out loud, not because it was funny, because it was deranged. I took screenshots, archived the page, and sent it to Laura. 5 minutes later, she called, her voice sharp. "We're done playing. I'm filing a complaint for criminal impersonation, fraudulent misrepresentation, and digital forgery. We're also going to file for a protective order, and we'll be seeking damages." I stared at the screen, then at the pine trees all around me. "This isn't about money anymore," I said. "It never was," she replied. Later that day, I got a call from a reporter with the Canyon Valley Chronicle. Apparently someone at the HOA had forwarded them the same integration story, hoping to boost PR. I declined an interview, but I gave them a single quote. "I didn't join anything. They forged a signature and are impersonating me. There will be consequences. I didn't need a megaphone, but I did need a fuse, and they just lit it for me." By this point, I'd installed motion-triggered cameras across the entire property. Cheap trail cams, military-grade batteries, camouflaged enclosures. I wasn't taking chances. Anyone who forged a contract with my name on it wasn't going to stop at Word documents and smug emails. I wanted hard evidence, and I didn't have to wait long. It started 4 nights after the forged PDF landed in my inbox. Around 2:30 in the morning, my phone buzzed with an alert from the Western Treeline cam. I rolled out of the cot, threw on boots, and checked the feed from the tablet mounted by the door. Grainy night vision footage showed a man in tactical-style black clothing, crouched just outside the cabin's back entrance, the side I hadn't restored yet. He was holding what looked like a small flashlight in one hand and something in the other. A tool, maybe. He scanned the door frame like he was checking for an alarm. I watched as he ran his hand over the knob, then pulled a phone from his pocket and spoke softly into it. After about 30 seconds of fiddling with the lock, he turned and disappeared into the trees. I saved the footage, time-stamped everything, and forwarded it to Laura and the county sheriff with the subject line, "Attempted break-in, HOA." By morning, I'd upgraded the door with a steel-reinforced latch and triple deadbolt. I also walked the entire perimeter of my land, checking every posted sign, trail, and blind spot. Near the north edge, the thinnest tree cover, I found a plastic housing tucked into the crook of an aspen tree. Inside, a mini drone parked on a wireless charger. It had a camera module. It had power. It had been there for at least a day, based on the sap dust gathered around the casing. I disarmed it and stuck it in an ammo case. That afternoon, another drone buzzed in. A newer one, flying low across the clearing, dipping under the treetops like it had flown the route before. I stepped outside just in time to watch it hover over the porch and drop something from a small metal clasp. It fluttered down onto my front steps like some absurd anti-Christmas card. A single laminated flyer printed in green block letters. HOA never forgets. You are not above the community. I took a photo of it in place, then fed it directly into the burn barrel. The drone zipped off before I could grab the Mossberg, but I clocked its model and manufacturer. Another entry for the report. I spent the rest of the day rewiring my perimeter cams with independent memory cards. No wireless upload. The next morning, it paid off again. Around 6:30, just before dawn, 3 men entered from the eastern access, the same side Karen and her lawyer had parked on weeks ago. They wore dark windbreakers with HOA security printed across the back in bold stencil font. One carried bolt cutters. Another had a crowbar tucked under his arm. The third appeared to be holding a clipboard, which felt somehow even more offensive. They approached my storage shed, a small prefab metal unit I'd reinforced and converted into a tool room and battery backup unit. The guy with the bolt cutters stepped up to the latch. He never got to use them. The moment the latch moved, my perimeter alarm, a discrete buried sensor, pinged. A silent alert hit my phone and I hit the floodlight trigger from my tablet. 6,000 lumens of blinding LED snapped on, lighting up the clearing like a prison yard. The 3 froze. One of them looked straight up into a camera mounted on the tree above him. He said something that sounded like, "Oh shit," and they bolted, stumbling back toward the trees, one nearly eating dirt in the process. I let them run. I had what I needed. I spent the next 2 hours stitching together the footage from all 4 cameras, clean angles, full faces, license plate on the black pickup they'd arrived in. I added the stills from the previous break-in attempt, the drone drop, and the trail camera finds. Then I sent the full package to Laura, the sheriff, and, just for fun, to the Canyon Valley Chronicle reporter who'd called me earlier. At noon, I drove to town and walked into the sheriff's office myself. I handed them a printed statement, a USB drive, and a written request to initiate a criminal investigation for trespassing, attempted burglary, and surveillance violations. Deputy Mendez looked up from the drive as I handed it over. "You sure you want to go public with this?" he asked. "I'm beyond sure," I said. "I want every neighbor in this county to know what this HOA is doing, and I want them to understand that this ends here." That evening, back at the cabin, I brewed coffee strong enough to bend metal and sat on the porch in full view of the tree line, with every light on and a thermos by my boot. Let them watch. I'd already made my next move. The tipping point didn't come with the forged documents or even the attempted break-in. It came when I found a camera nailed to my tree, one I hadn't installed. Midday sun glinted off a lens no bigger than a thumbprint, embedded inside what looked like a birdhouse. I'd passed it 3 times that week without noticing. It was positioned to face the cabin directly, a perfect vantage point. Inside the faux birdhouse, I found a motion-triggered IP camera with a SIM-enabled upload module. The power source was a solar sheet tucked onto a nearby branch with zip ties. Efficient, clever, illegal. I traced the feed. The camera had been broadcasting. It didn't store locally. It uploaded directly to a cloud server registered under the Mountain View Preserve HOA's domain. They were live streaming my property. That same day, I found 2 more, both concealed in identical structures, one aimed at the back entrance, the other positioned to watch the drive. This wasn't surveillance. This was targeting. I removed all 3, tagged them with evidence labels, and stored them in anti-static bags. Then I reached out to Laura. She called me before I could finish the email. "I already heard," she said. "The Chronicle ran your drone footage this morning. Local paper's blowing up. My phone hasn't stopped ringing." "Good. Maybe now someone will ask why a volunteer HOA has a security team and a budget for surveillance gear. They're doubling down," she said, "and we're going to nail them to the wall. But first, I need you to stay cool." I didn't answer immediately. "Sam," she said carefully, "don't escalate." I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "I won't start anything, but I'm going to finish it." The next morning, I recorded a public video statement and sent it to the local AM radio station where my old friend Terry ran the booth. I knew he'd play it raw. No edits, no disclaimers. The segment aired just after noon. "This is Samuel Rowling. I'm the legal owner of 60 acres of private land in Canyon County. I purchased it through the proper county auction process and registered every document with the recorder's office. I do not, and never have, belong to the Mountain View Preserve HOA. Since my lawful purchase, I've been harassed, stalked, impersonated, and surveilled by this organization. They have attempted to enter my property without consent, forged agreements in my name, and planted cameras in my trees. This is not a misunderstanding. This is targeted abuse, and I'm not going to pay for land I already own. I'm not going to be bullied off of it, and I'm not going to back down." By the end of the day, the station's Facebook post had over 6,000 shares, half of them from nearby towns, the rest from HOA victims across the country. People started sending me messages, stories, screenshots, horror shows from Oregon, Texas, Georgia, families harassed into foreclosure, widows fined for wind chimes, veterans threatened over flag placement. It wasn't just me. And now, the spotlight was on them. By dusk, someone had driven past my gate and thrown a brick at one of my cameras. It missed. I'd reinforced the casings with steel, but the motion sensor caught the plate. A black Ford Ranger registered to someone named Kenneth Bradshaw, Karen's son. That was the final piece. I compiled everything into a digital archive and delivered it to both the sheriff's department and the county prosecutor's office with Laura's help. She filed for an emergency injunction to prevent further contact or interference from any Mountain View Preserve representative. The sheriff delivered it personally to the HOA office the next morning. At 9 a.m., the HOA's website went offline. At 10:30, their social media pages were wiped clean. At noon, a new letter arrived at my mailbox, couriered by certified envelope, this time from the HOA's official legal firm, not their in-house clown. It was one sentence long. "We hereby cease all further contact and rescind any previous claims regarding your property." No apology, no admission, just retreat. I smiled. Then I made a call. "Laura, I want to sue them anyway." Her laughter nearly cracked the phone speaker. "I was hoping you'd say that." Courtrooms have a smell. It's not like movies, not wood polish and justice. It's recycled air, tired carpet, stale perfume. I'd sat in plenty of courtrooms during my Army discharge hearings and later while contracting with survival schools and remote defense operations, mostly as a consultant. But this one felt personal. I sat at the front of the small Canyon County courthouse, Laura at my side, wearing her usual blazer in combat-level calm. Across from us, the Mountain View Preserve HOA had brought their full clown parade. Karen, in a pearl-colored suit 2 sizes too tight. A stiff-faced lawyer named Hastings who looked like he bulk-ordered objections off a script, and the same so-called inspector who'd measured my gate weeks ago, now in a pressed polo shirt like he'd wandered out of a golf commercial. The judge was a barrel-chested woman named Mags, with steel gray hair and a habit of tapping her glasses against her teeth before speaking. I liked her immediately. The HOA's opening argument was what you'd expect. Emotional damage, lost environmental opportunity, some nonsense about community trust. They tried to pass off a speculative expansion plan as binding intent, claimed my cabin's location was critical habitat. Hastings tried to push the idea that my acquisition of the land had violated the ethical spirit of county development. Mag stared at him for a full 5 seconds, then said, "That's not a legal argument. Try again." Then it was our turn. Laura stood and delivered a calm, scalpel-sharp presentation. The auction records, the land title, the original county parcel designation, all clean, all final. Then came the real weapons. First, the video of the man snooping around my cabin at 2 a.m., synced with thermal footage from my trail cam. Second, the footage of the drone dropping the HOA flyer, which the HOA claimed didn't represent official action. Third, and most damning, the forged PDF with my signature next to an official analysis from a handwriting expert stating under oath that it had been faked using a traced sample. Then came the bomb. "I would like to enter into evidence an audio recording, Your Honor," Laura said, cool as frost. She hit play. It was Karen's voice, clear as a church bell, from her first uninvited visit. The clip cut in just as she said, "We demand $50,000 in compensation for your interference in our environmental plans." And then, seconds later, "We won't be leaving until this is resolved. You're on thin ice." Karen turned white as gypsum. Her lawyer blinked like someone had just thrown ice water in his face. The judge didn't ask for clarification. She simply leaned forward and said, "Let me get this straight. Your organization surveilled this man, forged a legal document, harassed him on private property, and sent uniformed security to intimidate him. You then falsified claims of agreement, and now you're asking this court to, what? Reward you." Hastings fumbled for words. Karen tried to stand and speak, but Laura cut her off with a soft, deadly line. "We're also filing a motion for criminal investigation under Colorado's revised statutes, Section 18, forgery, harassment, unlawful surveillance, and conspiracy." Mags didn't hesitate. "I am granting a permanent injunction against the Mountain View Preserve HOA. You are prohibited from entering, contacting, or otherwise interfering with Mr. Rowling or his property in any capacity." Then she turned to the bailiff. "Take Ms. Bridgewater into custody. I am forwarding her case to the district attorney for criminal charges, forgery, trespass, and unlawful threat." The courtroom exploded. Karen shrieked something about the people's rights as the cuffs clicked on. Her lawyer stood frozen, speechless. The so-called inspector tried to slide toward the exit but was intercepted by another officer. I just sat there, arms crossed, and watched the whole circus pack itself into a squad car. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered. Word had spread fast. The Chronicle, a Denver affiliate, even a blog that covered rogue HOAs. I gave them one quote: "You can't steal what you never owned, and you can't scare someone who's spent his life surviving worse than bad neighbors." That night, I walked back into my cabin, locked the door, and poured myself a glass of the strongest rye I had left. I thought the courthouse would be the final battleground. Turns out, it was only the public one. The week after Karen's arrest was a strange blur. I received dozens of calls, some from strangers who just wanted to say thanks for standing up to an HOA, others from journalists fishing for quotes. I ignored most of them. I didn't buy the land to be a poster child. I bought it for silence. But that silence didn't last. First came the anonymous letters. No return address, no name, just thick white envelopes dropped in my mailbox, postmarked from towns nearby. The first said, "You think you won. The board is bigger than her." Another one read, "This land was meant for more than you." Then came the car. At 1 in the morning, I was woken by the sound of tires on gravel. I grabbed the rifle, not loaded, but visible, and stepped onto the porch. A dark SUV was idling just outside my gate. I didn't approach. I simply flipped the floodlights and stood still. Whoever was inside didn't move for a long time. Eventually, they backed out. Quiet. No plate lights. Just gone. I didn't call the sheriff that time. I knew they wouldn't have much to go on, and besides, I was already prepared for the next step. The injunction was solid, but it didn't stop what came next. I received a notice from the county zoning board, a formal request for a survey review of my land. Someone had submitted a complaint that my property boundaries may overlap with proposed environmental infrastructure expansion zones. It was bureaucratic nonsense, of course, but it meant they were trying to shift the battlefield from legal to regulatory. I called Laura. "They're trying to tie you up in red tape," she said bluntly. This is a classic stalling tactic. They're hoping to make you burn time, money, and energy. But we can beat this too. She connected me with a licensed geodetic surveyor named Frank Minner, a wiry old guy with skin like worn-out leather and a GPS rig that looked more advanced than NASA's. He drove up from Durango the next day and started mapping my parcel down to the inch. In the process, Frank found something odd. "Did you know there's an old fire road just beyond your northern fence?" he asked. "No," I said. "There's no access from my side." "Well, someone's been using it. Tire tracks. And it leads straight to a clearing that overlaps with HOA boundary lines." He looked at me grimly. "Someone may be preparing to stage a claim that this road cuts through your parcel. If they get it rezoned, they could try to claim a utility easement." I felt my jaw tighten. They'd need a public interest claim to even try that. Frank smiled like a man who's seen this game too many times. "They're dumb. Not that dumb." That night, I walked out to the northern boundary. It was quiet, cooler than usual, moonlight soft on the pine needles. I stood at the tree line and watched the spot where the fire road disappeared into shadow, and there, embedded in a stump, was another sign. Not from the HOA this time. It was from the County Environmental Planning Committee. "Pending review, subject to protected habitat study." I photographed it, documented the GPS coordinates, and then I did what I should have done from the start. I activated the second phase of my surveillance grid, buried motion detectors along the northern and western perimeters, with alerts linked directly to a local server in a weather-sealed box buried under my cabin. A fail-safe relay would upload footage to an encrypted cloud archive if interference was detected. I wasn't just building a cabin anymore. I was fortifying a position, and they were running out of ways to surprise me. 2 weeks passed. Not a word from Karen's camp. No official correspondence. No new flags planted at my boundary. It almost felt like peace. The kind that's too quiet to trust. I kept to my routine. Reinforced the roof beams. Upgraded the solar backup. Hauled in extra gravel to reinforce the private road. The birds came back. The air smelled like pine and dry wind again. Almost normal. Then came the final hit. I was down near the creek bed, clearing brush, when my phone pinged. It was the perimeter alert. Northwest sensor, motion detected. Not an animal, too heavy. I bolted up the hill toward the cabin, boots slipping on loose soil. By the time I reached the bluff and got eyes on the field below, they were already there. 3 trucks, 1 white, 2 gray, no markings, but I recognized the 2 men standing at the tailgate of the lead vehicle, the same ones who'd stood beside Karen that first day. One was the so-called HOA inspector, the other had claimed to be their lawyer, and this time they weren't playing polite. They were unloading fencing materials. I didn't bother shouting. I hit the emergency relay on my phone, which instantly activated the backup cams, motion tracking, and drone lift from the roof hatch. The small quad buzzed up and locked onto the intruders. From the porch, I spoke through the loudspeaker. "You're trespassing. This is documented and will be submitted to the sheriff's office and my legal team." The so-called inspector smirked. "We're here under provisional jurisdiction," he called back. "The county has authorized a temporary boundary marker inspection." "Show me the warrant," I said. He held up a laminated card. Not a warrant, just a pending environmental overlay notice. The same type of garbage they'd tried with the stump sign. "You need to leave now," I said, "or the next people you see will be deputies." One of the workers flipped me off. The drone swooped lower, clicking photos. I didn't even have to say a word. They started packing up, but slowly, deliberately. A message. 2 hours later, a sheriff's deputy arrived. He was young, new, a little nervous. They said they were from a land management agency. He mumbled. Said they were acting under a grant review. "They lied," I said, handing him the footage and photos, including a screen grab of the fake badge the inspector showed. Laura filed an emergency motion the next morning. Within 48 hours, we had a court-enforced no-entry order against not just the HOA, but any third-party contractors acting on their behalf. Violations now carried felony trespass charges. But it wasn't just about keeping them out anymore. I decided to go on the offensive. With Laura's help, I filed a federal complaint citing conspiracy to defraud, forgery, harassment, and attempted property seizure. We tied the incidents together. The drones, the faked signatures, the false environmental claims, the intimidation. And we discovered something new. One of the contractors who tried to install the fencing. He had a felony record for fraud and impersonation of a public officer. That opened the door to federal racketeering charges. In the months that followed, the fallout spread fast. HOA's board was dissolved. Karen, already sitting in jail, now faced new charges under RICO statutes. The lawyer lost his license after a state investigation revealed forged credentials. And the inspector, arrested for impersonating a public officer and tampering with land records. I got a call from the Denver Post, then a spot on local radio. They called it the cabin standoff, some survivalist fantasy, but I wasn't playing a role. I was just living my life and defending it from parasites. Today, the cabin stands strong. A rebuilt porch, satellite uplinks, private server backup under 2 feet of concrete. A sign at the gate reads, "Private Wilderness. No HOA. Trespassing equals felony." And somewhere, tucked into a drawer, is a check from the HOA's insurance payout, $350,000 in damages. Most of it's untouched because you can't put a price on silence or on the sound of wind between the trees, unbothered by lawyers or liars.